The decisions that could be getting made will have a massive impact on 2025. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Sea Radio. My name is Corbin, and in today's video, we're going to be going over Craig Breslow's first real comments of spring training and how they could impact everything about this Red Sox pitching staff. We're going to go over the benefits and drawbacks of some of the things he said in his first presser. But before we get into that, just a heads up, it's Wednesday, which means we are going to be live tonight right here on this channel, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Instead of going over latest news and rumors, which we will talk about for sure, we're also going to be going over all the latest goings on with spring training, everything you need to know to stay updated on where the Red Sox are at. Again, that is going to be tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on this channel. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. So like I said yesterday, if you missed it, Craig Breslow did do his first spring training press conference. If you're new to baseball or new to the Red Sox, these are going to happen a lot over the course of spring training. These guys talk essentially almost every single day, right? Someone's doing some sort of interview, and Craig Breslow does a lot of them. In his first press conference, to be honest with you, what most of these are going to be, and in this first one, it was a lot of word salad, right? It was a lot of stuff that we've heard regurgitated in different ways. Not a ton of new stuff in there, but normally with these press conferences, if you pick things apart a little bit, you can get to some really interesting stuff, like what we're talking about in today's video, because he said two very specific things about this Red Sox pitching staff that I think are absolutely worth talking about. And the first one has to do with the Red Sox bullpen. When talking about the bullpen, specifically asked about the closer role, Craig Breslow said some interesting things, but it sums up essentially as the fact that he's open to a closer by committee, specifically mentioning Liam Hendriks as an option, Aroldis Chapman as an option, Justin Slayton as an option, and Justin Wilson as an option. Now, immediately, as Red Sox fans, at least my Red Sox fan brain went immediately back to the last time the Red Sox did a closer by committee, and honestly, how poorly it worked out. If you go back to 2022, that was the last time the Red Sox did a closer by committee type thing, where 9 different players had at least one save that year. 4 of them had at least 5, and their bullpen ERA, well, it was the 5th worst in all of Major League Baseball. It was simply not pretty. Usually, this team tends to operate much better when they have a set guy to go to in the 9th inning, right? Most teams in Major League Baseball tend to operate a bit better when they have a set closer. Now, what I will say is immediately you go there and you're soured a little bit by this idea. You sit there and you say, God, we cannot repeat 2022, or this will immediately kind of be a lost season. However, circumstances are a little bit different here, and I think that's worth talking about. In 2022, your 3 major closers were John Schreiber, who had never been a closer in his life, Tanner Houck, who had never been a closer in his life, Matt Barnes, who had kind of fallen off a cliff at that point, and then you had Garrett Whitlock as well, who had battled some injuries that season. So your top 4 closers really weren't closers at all. This year, if you're going to do closer by committee here, it's a little bit of a different story, right? Hendriks is an option. He's been an all-star closer in Major League Baseball before. Aroldis Chapman is an option. Don't love his recent success as a closer, right? There's a reason teams have stopped using him in the 9th inning, but he does have a history of a lot of success with closing games in Major League Baseball. One of the better closers of all time statistically during his time in dominance. Justin Slayton, who doesn't have a ton of closing experience, but was your second highest WAR pitcher in the bullpen last year, had one of the lowest ERAs in the bullpen. You could make the argument he was your best reliever last year, and somehow Justin Wilson made his way into this conversation. I have absolutely no idea how he ended up in this conversation, right? I don't know. It feels like you're looking at a list of pick the odd one out a little bit, but he's in there as well. So I do think it's a little bit of a different circumstance. On top of that, you've got a front office that's more solely focused on pitching and a brand new pitching coach who's been revered around the game. So yes, I immediately go back to 2022 and I go, oh God, here we go again, right? But it is a little bit of a different situation. Now, personally, I still think regardless of the talent you have in this bullpen, it makes a lot more sense for the Red Sox to at least start the year with someone set in that ninth inning role. And it's not even because I don't think a closer by committee is a potential possibility. It's because I think defined roles in a bullpen really sort of solidify their ability to really close out these games. We've seen it before, and I go back to that 2022 season when everyone was just sort of everything, right? There wasn't a set closer. There wasn't a set setup man. Everyone who was closing was also doing low leverage and high leverage spots in the middle of games. And all of a sudden, guys really couldn't get their heads wrapped around what role or what mentality they needed to have on a day-to-day basis. And I think that really hurt the Red Sox bullpen. I think defined roles in a bullpen, especially with Alex Cora as manager, really sort of solidifies their potential here. And we know that Alex Cora agrees with that because later in the day, Alex Cora also gave his first press conference of 2025, at least during spring training, and he said that basically word for word, that he prefers having one set closer in that role. So I don't love this for a couple of different reasons. 2022's experience with that idea. But two, I don't love the idea of Alex Cora not really having the set team that he wants to be able to manage coming into 2025, right? I would prefer that our manager has everything set to his liking coming into 25 so he could perform at his best as well. This is a totally different circumstance than 22, and I think a lot of people are immediately going to totally throw this idea out the window because of that. I know that's what I kind of immediately did before really sort of looking at the different circumstances, but this still makes me a bit wary, and it certainly does give me some pause, at least for concern coming into 2025. But it's not the only thing Breslow talked about when it came to the pitching staff, and this one is another interesting conversation. The other is Craig Breslow's opinion on a six-man rotation, which, spoiler alert, he's very open to this idea. It's something I think a lot of us kind of saw coming, at least as a possibility, especially after Red Sox signed Buehler and haven't moved any of their other pitchers, right? All of a sudden, you've got a bunch of guys and not a ton of spots for that rotation. I think we all kind of thought the idea of a six-man rotation was on the table. Craig Breslow kind of slapped it on the table yesterday, talking about just simply how in play that idea is, how he believes that even now with a five-man rotation, they are going to try and spread out the starts a little bit. So a six-man rotation is fully on the table. And honestly, it's not a terrible idea on the surface, right? You've got Giolito coming back from surgery. He could probably use an extra rest day. You've got Walker Buehler in his first full season back from injury. He could probably use an extra day of rest. Garrett Crochet's on his first season fully let loose. Your three kind of big additions to the rotation all have this caveat of either coming back from injury or having a full season off of injury. It makes a lot of sense why you'd want to spread out their starts a bit more to help prevent any sort of injuries popping up during the regular season. I think that's a pretty sound idea when it comes to how the Red Sox are going to balance this rotation. However, again, there's two sides to this coin, and I think the biggest sort of downside to it, and the reason why I've been sort of opposed to this idea up until this point, is the fact that you're going to have to take someone out of the bullpen in order to make this work. If you guys are unfamiliar with roster construction, you can only have so many pitchers on a team, and in order to have a six-man rotation, it means you have one less pitcher in that bullpen. And last year was sort of a prime example of what happens when a bullpen gets overused. Everything was good up until July when everything wasn't. Injuries started to pop up. Guys started to take downturns because of their overusage, and you started to see a whole lot of issues pop up in this bullpen. I would do anything in my power to hopefully avoid that situation coming again. Now, again, like we talked about with the closer by committee role, we got to take a look at the situation. I don't know. I think the situation is a little bit different to last year. Last year, you didn't have a ton of depth options. You didn't have a ton of options in minor league baseball that were ready to kind of spring up and help this team continue to move forward. This year, you do have a little bit of those options. Not only are a lot of guys in your current roster bullpen have options that could be sent down to minor leagues, leagues if they need to, but you also signed a ton of guys that have legitimate potential to minor league deals this offseason. So you're going to have a legitimate roster full of bullpen arms at the AAA or maybe even the AA level, depending on how deep this goes, that could end up impacting your big league club this year. And that gives you a bit of a safety net, right? If Zach Kelly starts the year on the major league club, but you got to use him more than you wanted to use him in the first 2 months because of this 6-man rotation, well, you can option him down to minor league baseball, and you could bring up a Sean Newcomb, who you signed to a minor league deal this offseason for a few weeks, and then sort of flip-flop them, DFA Newcomb, and have Kelly come back up. And all of a sudden, you kind of avoiding that whole, you're going to overuse these arm situations. And that's a really good thing. It's a good situation for the Red Sox to be in. The other sort of difference here between this year and last year is that you've got more flex players than you've had in the past. Garrett Whitlock is the shining example of that, right? He's got to be healthy, obviously, but if he is, we know what kind of weapon he can be in short spurts. And having a guy like that in your bullpen who can be a player who can come in and pitch 2 or 3 innings twice, maybe 3 times a week, probably not 3 times, twice a week here, and help this rotation sort of mend the gap, or specifically help this bullpen sort of mend the gap but to those high leverage guys. That's a big difference in what you had last year. You also, not only Whitlock, but you've got Winkowski, who to some degree, right, he's not exactly the greatest statistical pitcher in the world, but he does have that flexibility. You've got Priester, Fitz, Penrod, maybe Dobbins at some point, right? You've got these guys who are in minor league baseball right now who normally are in a rotation, but because you got such a deep rotation, you could kind of flex them a little bit in that bullpen and they could become long relievers. So it is a little bit of a different situation, again, like we talked about with the closer by committee with this 6-man rotation than you've had in years past. But again, I go back to that sort of set role thing. I'm curious if this also impacts that. You combine the idea that now you've got going to have at least a couple of pitchers who are just sort of an everyman pitcher that can come in for an inning in the 7th, who can come in for 2 innings in the 6th, who could come in for an 8th inning appearance from time to time, and then you've got a closer by committee, and all of a sudden you're back kind of completely here to that square one of nobody really knowing what their role really is, and that tends to not work out super well for the Red Sox. So looking at this 6-man rotation idea overall, I don't know that I love it too much. I think, again, it makes sense when you're talking about trying to prevent injuries to a rotation that really can't afford injuries coming into 2025. It makes a lot of sense, but I don't know what kind of detriment it's going to have to the bullpen. The other thing I wanted to talk about with this 6-man rotation is how much does it really limit the impact of your highest impact starters? I'm talking about specifically Garrett Crochet. If his goal this year is to pitch 30 plus starts, but because you're in a 6-man rotation, he's only going to make 23 to 25 starts, you're kind of limiting his potential impact on this team, right? Less big games are going to be pitched by Garrett Crochet because you're spreading the wealth a little bit. Would I rather have 25 starts from Cutter and just sort of spread it out a little bit as opposed to 30 plus starts from Crochet, Buehler, Houck, Giolito, and Bello? I don't really know, right? I think there is a little bit of a trade-off there. It's going to depend on how well a guy like Giolito does coming back, a guy like Cutter has coming back of a season that he had some struggles in, right? If these guys end up fixing themselves, this could be really deadly. If not, you're just sort of giving games to a league average to below league average pitcher that you could be giving to a guy like Bello, like Houck, like Buehler, like Crochet, who all have the potential to be well above average pitchers. So not only does it affect the bullpen, I also think it has some impact on how big of an impact some of these guys that should be at the top of your rotation and headlining this team are actually going to be capable of having. So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with this idea. I'm leaning towards I don't love this idea, but I do think it could work. So I want your opinions in the comment section down below. Help me decide where I land on this thing. Give me your opinions on both of these. What do you think about the closer by committee? Again, let's not just go, oh, it didn't work in 22. It's not going to work now. Let's look specifically at this situation and let me know what you think about it. 2, let me know what you think about the 6-man. Again, we've seen in the past. Let's talk about just this situation right here. Does it work with this specific Red Red Sox team, or could you see it working? What are the benefits and drawbacks in your eyes? Let me know all your thoughts on these ideas in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it would mean a lot to me. Don't forget, if you guys want to listen instead of watch these episodes, the best way to do that is to head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you tonight in the live stream and, of course, in the Red Seats.